podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Well, at least I was right, which I'm going to mention. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to How the podcast from Roker Report, as we have the fun task of dissecting our performance against Preston North End, which me and Martin have just sat through. I'm not sure if we're the bigger idiots for recording this or you are for listening. I'm sure we'll work that out as we go along. But we can use it as some sort of therapy, I suppose, and hopefully we'll feel better afterwards. Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Because to help me, I've already mentioned with this an enviable task, someone who's been watching the lads at stupid o'clock in the morning in Australia. It is, of course, Martin Wanless. Hello, Martin.
Hello, mate. I wasn't too bad a show this morning. It was 6:45, so, but yeah, it doesn't exactly fill you with much joy for the rest of the day, does it? Jesus wept.
Well, we were saying before we started recording that I started watching it with my lad, all of 11 years old. Not quite sure he's got used to Sunderland not winning every week. He sees the Man Cities and the Liverpools of the world. But at half time, he just asked politely to go to bed. And I didn't really have an argument to stop. I think back in the day, my dad might have given us a clip around the back of the head for asking that. But
you know what? It's actually a good insight, isn't it? Because if you need him to go to bed at some point, you can just stick that match on. So, I don't suppose recordings of that will be in high demand, but as a tactic for getting kids to bed, it could be a winner, mate.
I should just keep all of the recordings of, Sunderland's like dull 0-0 draws and stuff on file and just stick them on in an evening just to see if he'll go to bed. The
2025 home games so far have got a bit of a catalogue going, haven't we?
Well, let's get into this one because I did kind of call it on the preview during the week. I had just had this feeling, Preston North End at home just had that feeling about it. And I mean, just as a kind of overall summary, we'll get into the details because we kind of have to. But as a summary, to me, it had the feeling, and even kind of the crowd in the background and the atmosphere and the feeling about it. It was almost kind of going back to the League One days where we drew games in midweek and, we were clearly better than the other side, but couldn't quite break them down. And it just had that feeling about it.
Do you think we were better than them? I think we struggled for large parts of it. I think we were just like devoid of idea. And it's bizarre, isn't it? If you look at the home games that we've had recently, I know obviously we won on Saturday, but we've had a run of home games, haven't we? That was Plymouth, Watford. Obviously we got beat against, and there was another one, wasn't there, that we drew that we should have. On paper we should have won, and there just seems to be a lack of whether is it a lack of confidence or a lack of tactical stuff going on to actually break these teams down, because I think we really struggle against teams that come to the Stadium of Light and just are well structured and are there to get a point, and we just didn't get going. I don't think we even had a shot on target in the first half. Like it just seemed, as I agree. I'm not going to criticize anybody who was there because I wasn't, but the atmosphere was, it was almost like the crowd were, and I can understand that the crowd were waiting for the team to give them something because of the recent home form. It wasn't a game that you're going into really expecting us to win 3 or 4-0. Like we're not that sort of team at the minute at home. And you called a draw in the match predictions before the game. I said it would be a narrow 1-0 win with Mundle scoring, so I got that bit right. But it's difficult. Like we just didn't get going. Nothing clicked, and we end up trying to grind something out, and ultimately we end up getting a bit of buoyancy and something going with all of that bloody stoppage towards the end. That was the one thing that then got everybody up, we could have actually got the 3 points eventually, but I don't know, that first 80 minutes or so, we were just so lacking in ideas. I'm not sure what was going on.
Yeah, but me and you have both mentioned, though, recently on pods about our home form and how we kind of attack at home. And I think this is another example, because I think a lot of our home games follow the same pattern, where we just think at some point we're going to get that chance, we're going to take it, we're going to get into the lead, and then we're going to slow it down, and then we're going to kind of grind teams down, maybe nick another one, but overall kind of think we're going to get the 3 points. And this seems similar, because I mean, if you look at it, as you said, there was a lot. I mean, when I look at my notes, I've got a lot of half chances, but you go to that one 5 minutes before half time, and the Isidor chance, and we'll come on to it. But if you take that, you go into half time 1-0, and you probably go on to kind of comfortably win the game, and nobody really notices the level of performance. It kind of disappears a little bit, and it's happened quite a few times this season.
No, it doesn't. Results often mask things, don't they? Or they kind of distract you from things that are going on. I think on the podcast that me and Gav and Neil did after the Cardiff game, Neil kind of said about the subs that were made, and said, well, it was the right decision because we won the game. Mm. And it's not necessarily always as clear cut as that, but yeah, look, if we get that goal, it changes the whole dynamic of the game. But, Preston had a chance in the first. Preston's probably had the best chance of the first half up to that point. And you can say if they'd scored that one, then that changes the game again, doesn't it? But, with Isidor, right? And I think, I've certainly criticised Patterson over recent weeks for, things that have cost us points and goals. Isidor deserves equal criticism, because against Hull and tonight he has missed absolute sitters, which your striker needs to score. Like, just as your goalkeeper needs to hold on to corners at the near post, your striker needs to be putting headers like that from that position on target. And that's 2 in the space of 2.5 weeks that he's absolutely fluffed. And you don't get chances set up better than you set up Isidor for that header. Like, I thought that was an awful miss.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, just on the subject of Isidor, let's go back to the beginning a little bit, because I was right at the beginning of the game. I was reading your starting 11 that you kind of predicted for, and I mean, sometimes it's, how can you predict these? Because I said on the preview, I had a feeling that he might go with both of them, because there's almost a guarantee you're not going to start both of them on Saturday against Coventry. Yeah. So one of them's going to get a rest, or probably both of them, because they'll probably have, one of them might have an hour or so on, and the other one kind of comes on and replaces them. So I thought they'd kind of alternate the weekend. So I had a feeling that both of them might go up top. I noticed in yours, you didn't think he'd go that far, but you kind of had Rig and you had Job coming out, and you still had Mundle in there. You didn't think Watson was fit enough. But in some ways, with those two going up front, at times they look quite dangerous. But actually, bizarrely, because I've been calling for them two to play up top, and quite a lot of other people have. But bizarrely, I thought in the midfield with Neil and Job, I thought actually at times in the first half, those two looked a bit lost as a two.
Well, they're not used to playing as a two, are they? I think that's the thing. And I think we saw as soon as Rig came on and we went back to that usual formation, that we're far more accustomed to play. That's what we've played for the vast majority of the season. And like I thought it was I thought if Mundle had been fully fit for the past couple of months, there was no way in the world Watson starts that game. Like, Watson wasn't ready to start. I think he looked really rusty and off the pace. And I think, I'd made the comment that I think, we wouldn't see Watson start a game until after the international break. And I think that probably should have been the case. But I think when we play two up front, we've got to go longer. And we've got to, what we noticed today is Patrick Roberts was tucking inside a lot more to try to create a third man in the centre, which then leaves you a bit lopsided. And I just think, Isidor wasn't in the game in the first half. I think that, he did two notable things. Well, three if you count his miss. He gave away the quickest free kick I've seen forever. I don't think anybody had touched the ball from kickoff. The ball hadn't even reached the bloody goalkeeper, had it? And he gave away a free kick. And he slipped over the ball. And I think, he barely got involved or had a touch in the game in the first half. He really struggled. And we've seen that a bit with Isidor. In certainly in home games, we've kind of seen that where we haven't been able to spring him long. He does struggle to get involved. But I thought with my end being a bit closer to him, he might have found a way to get involved a bit more. But he was just missing. But I think we really suffered from not having that third man in midfield, because they were obviously playing 3 at the back and 5 across the middle of the park, and I think they just kept outnumbering us.
Yeah, and it was interesting actually when you see them both playing up top together. It's interesting looking at the difference between Mayenda and Isidor. You see Mayenda dropping off, holding the ball up a bit more, and I don't know if they were maybe told to play like different roles in a partnership up top, where Isidor maybe was told to play off the shoulder a bit more and go for those long balls over the top. But it was always Mayenda who seemed to be offering himself more for a pass and to take it into feet and turn. And we seemed to get a bit, if we were going to get some joy from anywhere in that first half, it was Mayenda dropping deep and turning and getting a bit of space to run into.
It was, and I think when you play, it's a really funny one, isn't it? Actually, because when you look at some of the shape that we have, even tonight, the shape's similar to what we play normally, because we normally do that 4-4-2 out of possession, don't we? So normally it's Rig who pushes up alongside Isidor, but Rig then naturally kind of drops back, probably 10 yards deeper than Mayenda was dropping back. But you still got that sort of rotation where one of them goes right up top onto the last defender, and the other one drops off a little. So that was obviously Mayenda's role. And when you're playing 2 up front, if Isidor's just up front by himself or Mayenda's just up front by himself, naturally they've got to come and try to hold the ball up and get a little bit more involved. But when there's 2, when Mayenda was kind of pushing up still to make a 4-4-2 in possession, Isidor was trying to be on the last man the majority of the time to try to sneak through, use his pace to get beyond the line. And the 2 of them didn't click. I think, as you say, that a lot of the dangerous situations came from Mayenda, coming maybe 10 yards off, picking the ball up, trying to turn, trying to drive forward. And he did it on a couple of occasions, didn't he? I think he put a couple of nice crosses over. There was one that he came into the box, and to be fair, he could have passed to Isidor, and he chose a shot, and it was blocked, wasn't it? But I think it's a really difficult switch to make when you haven't played, because strikers rely on connection. Strikers rely on understanding where each other is and playing off each other. If you're going to play 2 up front, you've got to have that understanding. And I just think Mayenda and Isidor don't have that understanding because they haven't played together up front through the middle enough to develop it yet.
Yeah. And I mean, just going back as well to that midfield too, I think, because a couple of times Preston in the first half got a bit of joy from pressing them, because they weren't quite sure how to do that pivot with just the 2 of them. Normally, they can sit in because they know there's going to be one ahead of them, and they know they've got a pass ahead of them.
No, that's right.
But when it was just the 2 of them, they were looking at what to do, and sometimes they were blindly just trying to hook it over the top to assume that Isidor and Mayenda were going to make a run. But actually, I think against a better side, and I think we've learned something. By trying it against like the likes of Preston at home, because I think against a better side, they would take more advantage of how we were in midfield.
Well, you'd think that, wouldn't you? But then it worked. It was a Sheffield United at home, wasn't it? It worked really well. So it's kind of a difficult one. I think the factor here was that we were actually outnumbered in midfield, because they had 5 across the centre with the wing backs pushing up. So I just thought it was potentially the wrong formation to play. And, I think Alan Brown should have played, against his former club. I think, if that was us playing against our former captain, you know what's going to happen, don't you? So I just think we got it wrong. And I know people have been calling for Mayenda and Isidor to play up front as a 2. I've been reluctant to do so. I've wanted them on the pitch at the same time. But I think, keeping that formation that we've actually has been successful for us this season. It's been successful for the majority of cases, hasn't it? And I just think we looked disjointed. We looked as if we were waiting for something to happen. We looked outnumbered in midfield. We couldn't get those little triangles going. As a consequence, as I said before, Roberts was getting dragged into the centre of the pitch more. He was coming across to try to outnumber or get that overload, and we just we just didn't click. I think we looked on different wavelengths, and obviously add in to that Watson coming in for his first start, however long, and even regardless of that, he's started 2 games, 3 games, 2 games. So it's not as if you bring somebody who's experienced and is a regular part of that jigsaw into the team. You've got somebody else who's new, and I just think we struggled. I think all from the first whistle, it just didn't look like it was clicking.
Yeah, well, funny. I was thinking there when you were talking about players who seem to pop up with a goal against us, former players. I was going to mention Brett Angel because he seemed to pop up with, and you spoke to him recently, so I thought that was a little segue into that. Yeah, but going back to this, I mean, look, let's sum up the first half. Let's get rid of the first half, because I think that we're talking about, I mentioned at the beginning that I thought that we were dominant, but without actually pressing and creating chances. I thought we looked the better side. We were playing the better football. Preston looked like, they weren't as good as us, but we just didn't seem to have that tempo and intensity that was able to kind of break them down. Because if you look through the first half, when I've made my notes, I've kind of got half chance. We've got a half chance here, that Mayenda half chance, Watson half chance with a header. And then again, that kind of chance, big one 5 minutes before half time, Isidor should have scored. And then when I look at my notes, I'm seeing, slow tempo, and it, it had that testimonial feel about it. We looked really busy, I thought, but without actually creating anything. And I suppose the point was that we didn't test their keeper at all. Their keeper did not make a save at all in that first half. But the other thing, the other aspect of playing that 2 up front is if you do start with 2 up front and you go attacking, it is quite difficult to then go more attacking or to try and change things up to have a different dynamic. And I know he did eventually, but it is strange when you end up having to try and go more attacking by bringing a striker off.
But it's how you define being attacking. Is it the personnel on the field, or is it the setup or the approach of the team? And we were not getting any joy with 2 centre forwards up against 3 centre halves. Like that was the case. And I think it might have been different if they played flat back 4, because you got 2 against 2 through the centre. But we just weren't getting any joy, so we had to change it. And I was really surprised he actually didn't even change the shape, because he could easily have put Mayenda out on the right for 20 minutes towards the end of that first half, put Roberts in as the 10, and do something like that just to try to move them around a little bit, because we just weren't effective. And you talk about your notes. I'll tell you what my notes said. I didn't make very many. Slow start, scrappy. The next one is Watson should score. We are playing crap. Is Isidor playing? We've had no shots on goal. Like, those are, the highlights of my notes for the first half. And I think really that probably quite accurately sums up. We could have saved ourselves 18 minutes by just reading.
Well, talking about slow start, I think we came out in the second half, and I think it looked like Heckenbottom had got Preston back in and said, look, these are here for the taking. Because I saw some of his comments after the Sheffield United game where they were a bit disappointed that Sheffield United hadn't really played that well, and they couldn't take advantage of it, and they conceded one and then kind of lost in a game they should have gotten something out of. And I think at half time, it seemed like, you can imagine him reminding the players of that game, thinking, we're here, we're 0-0 at half time. Sunderland haven't done anything. Sunderland haven't pressed us. They haven't kind of been all over us. They haven't been, he'll point to the fact the keeper didn't make a save in that first half, because they came out first 5-10 minutes of that second half. And I thought, we kind of, it almost felt like the first half was our chance to get on top and get that goal.
Yeah. And it wasn't. they came out and they would have been encouraged by just the sort of vibe around the stadium, because they would have known if they got control of the game, never mind the goal, if they just got control of the game, then, it already felt a bit nervy and it would feel even more so. And, I thought, yeah, they came out and caused us problems. And, for the second game in a row, it forced us to make a couple of early subs. I think, was it 55 minutes? We brought 2 players on and again, changed the formation. Really, we kind of went back to what we normally do. And I actually thought we started to look better immediately, but then they went in front.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because a couple of minutes before the subs, I checked the scores and I wrote a note saying Burnley and Sheffield United were drawn at the time and all we needed to do was nick one and get the 3 points, and we're already kind of making ground on them. And like you say, a couple of minutes later, Watson and Mayenda come off for Mundle and Rigg. It didn't seem like the crowd were in the stadium were kind of universally supporting that decision. But like we said, there's different ways of kind of doing things. But having said that, as you've said in the first half about Isidor, I was really surprised that it was Mayenda and not Isidor who came off, because even in that second half, even in the first 15, 20 minutes until he came off, I thought Mayenda was still the one who was looking sharp and the one who was showing himself for the ball.
No, I agree. I think the only thing that would have come into his thinking, which would have influenced it, is how much football both of them have played recently. So Wilson's been on the bench the last couple of games, so he's had a decent break. Mayenda's not played that much regularly, but then he's started the last 3. So, that could have been it. To me, that's the only explanation, because when you look at it on face value for that game, Mayenda was far more threatening than Isidor was.
Yeah. Is this something we're going to have to keep in mind over the last 9 games of the season? Because, we've kind of lost ground again. And, Lebree's mentioned in the last couple of press conferences, he's mentioned about managing the squad and managing his players. And you see Watson coming in tonight for Mundle, which has surprised a few people. You see, people coming out having a rest. I was actually surprised to see Serkin coming back in. But is this something we're going to have to, and Brown as well? Obviously, that's the other one who came in for a game and come out, and you're surprised he didn't get on the pitch. But is this something we're going to have to keep in mind? The fact that he's going to keep rotating this squad, and sometimes we're going to raise eyebrows at decisions, whether it's a starting 11 or in the subs. But he's thinking 2 steps ahead. He's already thinking of what's coming after, and he wants almost a fully fit squad after that last game of the season.
And I think, if you're going to be kind, you can kind of look at it and go, right now, they're going, we need everybody to, it's almost, in a daft way, it's almost like a pre-season, if you're looking at it from one perspective. If you've written off our automatic chances, right, you're going, okay, we've got this spell of 10 games that we need to make sure that this squad is as fit as possible to ramp into the playoffs. Right, so from a fitness point of view, and look at you hear and read things about Lebree overplaying people and not this person needs rest, all that sort of stuff. I might be incorrect in saying this, but I'm sure I've read he's got a doctorate, and he did his doctorate in athlete recovery. So if somebody knows about load on athletes and all that sort of stuff, I think it's the manager, right? So. If that's, I'm 99% sure that's accurate. If it's not, I apologise for doing a Donald Trump fake news.
Everyone's checking now.
I'm sure it's about athlete recovery, and it might be in short things, but it's certainly in that thing. So he's got that in his makeup, in his background. The thing you can't get away from though is that we've got to have the performances to match. So fitness is one thing, but performances are another. And to me, performances always improve if you win, because you get that little bit of confidence, that buoyancy, and fitness is important. It's got to underpin everything else, but it only goes so far. And I think if we're thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead already, we're taking our eye off what we've actually got to do now. And again, to me, you might be looking towards the Coventry game. And the only thing I might have done looking towards Coventry game is bring Job out of that team tonight, because he was on one yellow card away from a 2-match ban. You've got other options in there, and I thought there was a few occasions where you could see he was hesitant to go in for a stretch tackle because he was like, I'm going to risk getting booked here if I do that. So that maybe affected his performance to a certain extent. But if we are, and I think we saw it earlier as well, didn't we? When he brought Samed in and trying to get him games, get him up to speed where it wasn't necessarily the obvious selection choice. And I don't know. I think there's a fine line, isn't there? I am always one. You pick your strongest team and you crack on with it.
Well, yeah. Well, for me, the playoffs isn't necessarily about fitness. It's about momentum.
Exactly.
It's like if we go into the playoffs on the back of 4 straight wins to end the season or 5 straight wins or whatever it is, you're going to be flying, and the players are going to be like 10 feet tall going into the playoffs, and that's how you want to feel. They feel fresh, not because they've been missing games, because they've been winning games.
He's got the confidence from winning.
Yeah, but it seems like he's insisting with these press conferences on managing his squad. But back to the game, 65 minutes, we go behind. Strange goal because it came after a couple of minutes of pressure from Preston, and it was kind of building up, and we made a right hash for a good couple of minutes of putting a foot on the ball and really kind of clearing it. And, it just seemed to keep coming back for a couple of minutes. And then when the ball came inside, I mean, Reece, we talked about him on the preview, top scorer for Preston, and grabbed another one. I mean, good finish, but he turned Dan Neil twice. And then when he turned him the last time, one thing I couldn't understand was Chris Merpham not pushing out and closing him down. I just couldn't. I couldn't get my head around that he didn't kind of charge out, because he beat Dan Neil the second time, and you knew what he was going to do. And to just close that angle off, because and I don't think Patterson had much chance at winning in off the post. It was a good hit with his left foot. But still, I just felt, even though the pressure had been building, it was still a soft goal that he turned the midfielder twice, and then the centre-half didn't go out and put any pressure on him.
I almost think it was one of those where they actually weren't that concerned about having the ball in that position. I think it was almost like, well, if you want to take it on from there, take it on, which obviously wasn't the right thing to do, as it turned out. But like he'd already missed one, hadn't he? He'd gone pretty much clean through and blasted it.
hit the corner flag, I think.
Blasted it wide. But we already had a little bit of a warning about what he could do, and I think we were linked with him in January. I think he would have actually been a good addition to our striking lineup, really. But it was a nice goal. Yeah, I don't think any blame can be apportioned to Patterson on this one. Like, it was a good hit, but I just think we were almost content to let him have the ball there because we didn't think it was too dangerous.
Yeah, but it was a good hit. I mean, like I said, I don't think Patterson stood a chance in off the post. And then we kind of huffed and puffed for another 10 minutes or so. And then, as I've got it written down, about 12 minutes to go, it all started going a bit weird. It all started with, I think it was Porteous, went down with, and he ran into Hume and pretended that he had a
09, I think, wasn't it?
09, was it? And then he pretended he had a head injury. So then the referee stopped the game. And then as soon as the referee stopped the game, he jumped up and he was telling the referee he was okay and didn't want to go off. But then the referee said, the referee said, I've stopped the game. You need to get checked out. And then bizarrely after that, it all started to go crazy. I mean, the way I saw it was another 3 players, I think, went down like 2 yards away from the touchline. Yeah. And then Preston started making random substitutions where even the Preston players didn't know what was going on. Stuart McCall was coming on to fight people randomly at various points in all of this. And you saw the Sunderland bench saying, we want to get on with it. And then the referee had to count the players. And I think it was the Sunderland bench who told them that their player hadn't gone on.
Extra player on, yeah.
And then we tried to start the game, and the referee didn't know how to restart the game. And then he had a word with his 4th official who was explaining everything that was going on. But it was embarrassing from a referee's point of view.
No, it really wasn't. It was funny because I actually thought he did all right, the referee, up until that point. I'd never seen him before. I can't recall him.
No.
I can't recall him ever popping up, but I actually thought he'd refereed it pretty well. I thought he kept the game moving when he could, and he put yellow cards out when he needed to, but he, in a split second, he just absolutely lost any semblance of control, didn't he? And it just ended up in the most bizarre series of events. Chris Mepham was trying to pretty much stretch people off by hand to get people moved off the ground. Preston players were walking towards the touchline and then dropping down a yard away from it. And like, I tell you what, if I was a Preston fan, there's gamesmanship, and if your keeper goes down for a little bit to waste my time, that was completely disgraceful. If we did that, I would be upset that we'd done that, because I thought it was pathetic, and I thought it was really, really poor. But the referee enabled it to some extent. The referee allowed them to get away with it. As I say, if he'd booked Porteous, and he's a dickhead, mind, if he'd booked Porteous at the start and made him go off for the 30 seconds, none of the rest of it happens.
Yeah. And
I just
if
don't
he
think
books
any
the
of the
players
rest
as well, the ones who go down a yard away from the touchline, they should get a yellow card as well.
That should be a yellow card offence, and he would have been sent off because he's the one who kicked the ball away from 09 in the first half. So, but what it did do, it galvanised the crowd, right? You get that sense of injustice, that sense of bloody hell, this lot absolutely taking the piss here, and it got everybody up for it, and it gave the team momentum because the team felt aggrieved. And it's like, I think, where you almost need to kick up the arse before you get out on the pitch. We needed that drive, and that's a mentality thing. And it's an interesting point to actually talk about, right? Because you can talk about formations, you can talk about personnel, you can talk about patterns of play and all that sort of stuff. But unless you've got that mental drive to get over the line and win, then you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. And I have praised this group on a lot of occasions for that mental strength. I think we've got some decent mental strength, but it's almost like it really kicks in with 30 minutes left or 20 minutes left to rescue a point or to get that win or see the win out. It's almost like it's like when Fergie was Man U manager, sometimes you see he needs to get the hairdryer out before the game, and we just kind of it's almost like we start off too comfortably, and we need that sense, to feel aggrieved to go on, because I thought for the last 50, well, it ended up being 15 minutes, didn't it, with the 9 minutes of added time, or 20 minutes. But I thought we actually played our best football in that last little spell.
Yeah. You've said two things there that I've got written down, and that's what I was going to say. I was going to say that without Preston doing that, we don't get a point.
No.
Like if Preston had played it out and even tried to attack us, that I don't think we would have had that drive to go and get that goal and push on and and ultimately get the equaliser and potentially get a winner, because I just don't think that happens. It gave us that drive. And it's funny, the second thing you said was, you said Ferguson. The one I was going to say, even though you're talking kind of elite, but I was talking about having characters like Roy Keane in your starting 11 who gets the anger into his team. And you're playing Preston North End midweek, where the crowd needs something to hang on to get up for the game, and you need a team to come out with bubbling with anger to get started, to feel kind of energized before they come out. And that's what we kind of lacked until we started feeling angry about this. I mean, I go back, even when, Kevin Ball, you look at someone like that, where, Roy Keane again, going back to where he says, just smash someone, just to get everyone up for it, just to cause a bit of, tension between the two sides. And that's almost what we needed. Because a minute later, and I was going to say the Porteous thing as well, the interesting thing was, that because I was waiting to see when the ref was going to let him come back on, because they were screaming from the sidelines that he was allowed to come back on. And a couple of times the ball went over the far side. Yeah. And I thought, right, he's going to wave him on. And he still didn't. And I wonder if, having looked at it, because he feigned the injury, whether actually the referee gave him a little punishment and almost said, no, you're staying off for a bit long.
He's got to stay off for 30 seconds, hasn't he? So if he goes off for treatment and there hasn't been a yellow card, he's got to stay off for 30 seconds. So he was off for then, and then if it's 30 seconds and the ball's over there, he can't come back on. So, the referee might have, if I was a ref after all of that, I probably would have added a little bit of time on as well, just to say, oh yeah, I'm in charge, not you dickhead. But look, it kind of, galvanizes, and you're completely correct in what you say. Like the team needs to give the crowd something to get going off from the off, right? Because from that first whistle, you're not going to have that sense of injustice or that bad refereeing decision or something like that. The team has got to start strongly to get the crowd going. And, yes, it works both ways, but the crowd reacts rightly so to what they see. And if we see a team that's strolling around complacent a little bit, or you kind of think things aren't quite clicking or things aren't, you're going to naturally react to that, right? So, to get that bit, we saw it in the last 10 minutes. The crowd was up, the team was up. As I say, we kind of need to harness that somehow. But what a strike by Mundle. Tell you what, that is what Mundle brings to the team. And I am so glad he is back and fit and firing, because we've missed him so much. And, if you'd said a year ago, Romain Mundle would be one of the key players in this team, you'd have been, you'd probably get some decent odds on it, because he hadn't shown that much after he signed towards the end of last season, did he? But he has really established himself as a massive part of what we're trying to do, and that was such a good goal.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember when we signed Mundle, and there's some sort of YouTube kind of clips thing reel going around with Mundle, and pretty much every clip was this goal. It seems to be his thing where he cuts inside, and I mean we've already seen it a couple of times where he's attempted it. I remember one goal where he put it in the bottom corner, I think, from memory, but one like this where he puts it in the top corner. And I don't know about you, similar age, but reminds me of like Alan Johnson back in the day where he put in and curl it in that exact same corner.
Beautiful. Exactly. No, Johnson was fantastic at that, wasn't he? But he was more of a jinky player than a direct runner like Mundle is. I think Mundle's probably got a bit more pace on him than Johnson did, but very similar sort of goal where he can cut in and loop it over the keeper right in that top corner. But we've missed him so much. And with Mundle as well, sorry Chris, like he is one of those players who can stick a boot in and close people down, and he's always busy. And I think potentially from the start of a game, that's something that we need. And Watson's a great talent. He's got a lot of good attributes, but that's getting stuck in, and that off the ball work isn't really amongst them. And I think again we kind of missed that from the start of the game.
Yeah, a couple of minutes later, Bellingham could have won it. Now I thought this was a better chance than actually people were kind of, because seemingly people were like, oh well, the cross was quite quick and it was a bit low. But I thought that was a cracking chance, few yards out, but to not get it on target from there.
Yeah,
I mean, he did brilliant getting into the right position, but I thought once he's there, make contact with it. But I don't know whether he tried to be too clever and stick it in the far corner or what, but just get something on it.
I guess it's that point of the game, isn't it, where you might overthink things because that's probably the chance, and you always know going into that sort of the last 5 or 6 minutes, there's going to be one chance. There's going to be one chance, and if you get that chance, you got to make sure of it. But as a consequence of that, you overthink it potentially, I think that was probably the case there, because he hasn't scored for a while. Actually, Bellingham, has he? I think he hasn't scored for maybe Swansea. Swansea away.
He had a couple of shots. One was 20 yards over the bar and stuff, but yeah.
But he doesn't get as many goals as he should do. Like he's got goals in his locker, and he should be scoring more. And I think that central midfield role that he plays, we kind of need somebody to be chipping in with 7, 8, 9, 10 goals a season from that position. And he hasn't quite got there yet. But again, that's as an isolated chance, he should have scored. I think in the context of the game, there's a lot more pressure on him at the time he gets that chance, which potentially makes him second guess himself. But it shouldn't have ever come to that being pivotal, because if we'd turned it on earlier, it's so frustrating, especially when you honestly, when you look at the other results. Burnley have dropped points and stuff like that, and us and Burnley tonight have just basically given automatics to Sheffield and Leeds.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you a bit, because obviously before the game, I mean, I did predict 1-1, but you still kind of think, well, Preston, middle of the table, we're at home. They've only, I think that I said they'd won 3 away all season. We should really be looking at 3 points. But in the context of the game, a late equaliser, I mean, is that a good draw or is it not a good draw? I mean, how should we feel about that?
Even given the time that we got the equaliser, we still have 10 minutes, 15 minutes left of football. Like we still should have won. So like that's 100% 2 points dropped in the context of the game individually, and more importantly in the context of the season. Like I don't think there's a strong argument, unless you can make one. I don't think there's a strong argument for it being a good draw. Because a point's no use to us. Right now, a point's no use to us.
Yeah. But other than that, like I said, keeping that momentum where you're not getting beat, that's the only thing you can hang your hat on. But obviously, in the position we're in, it doesn't really make a difference.
You'd rather draw than get beat, of course you would. And it keeps the home record looking all right. But
to be fair, I haven't celebrated a goal because of what Preston did. I haven't celebrated a goal like that for quite a while, because that you just wanted it, and it showed with the players. But where does this leave us? Because look, I think you've just called it that we've basically, and Burnley, you can chip in with this. Leeds have got that game in hand. Leeds and Sheffield United look like they're going to be the top 2 now. We are cemented in the playoffs. Coventry got beat tonight as well. So, I mean, everyone's really fighting. Bristol City got beat at Sheffield United. They're all scrapping. West Brom drew, I think. So it's like really tight underneath us. That's going to be a scrap where they're going down to the last day of the season as usual to see who's in the playoffs. I mean, they're going to be fighting tooth and nail. Players are going to be playing with knocks. We've got this period of time. Like I said, Lebrie's going to try and manage the squad. We need to get some momentum going. Where does this leave us for the last 9 games?
Well, I think it's what you and I said earlier. We've got to go into the playoffs in good form. In good form, going into the playoffs is more important than having a fully fit squad who's not in great form. So to me, we've just got to go at these last 9 games, because we've obviously got Coventry on Saturday, and Coventry, we could well end up playing them in the playoffs. So, we've got to psychologically get something over them, ideally, on Saturday. So I think we've got to go in. I think you look at Isidor, and I think Mayenda has made a real problem, which is what you want players to do. But I think you kind of look at the Mayenda and Isidor thing, and if you take a step back and you pick our strongest 11, you might argue that Mayenda should be in there. I might argue that Isidor should be in there. I think after seeing tonight, and considering the ability to have somebody on the bench who can change a game, I think it'd be hard pushed to argue for both of them being in the starting 11, because I just don't think it suits us. Looking at the last 9 games and then into the playoffs. So I really think he's got to resolve that. And then if it's a choice, a straight choice between Isidor and Mayenda for this last spell, who would you go for? Because I think he's almost got to either stick his hat in one of them, or we go, okay, we're going to rotate them for certain games, which potentially he might do. You've got the biggest issue I can see coming up is that fitness for certain players, and whether he uses the games that we've got to build players up for fitness, or we prioritise form. Now, we've got some hard games coming up. Like, we've got Coventry. I've just got the fixture list up here. We've got Millwall at home, which I always love it when Alex Neil comes back to the stadium with the team. And we've got West Brom away, Tony Mowbray. It's going to be a hard game. Yep. Norwich away. and Swansea at home, Bristol City away, Blackburn at home, Oxford away, QPR at home, and then the playoffs, right? So what we don't want to do is go into that last 4 or 5 games on the back of a couple of draws and a couple of defeats. We need to go into that little last run in good form, and I think we're going to have to be at our best over the next 4 games to get anything out of those 4 games. We're going to have to play really well to pick up points in those games, and I think we're probably set up better to play away from home than we are at home. I think we've proven that on a number of occasions throughout the season, but there's 3 difficult away games in the next 4. And what we've said it earlier, like the worst thing that could happen is for us to go into that little last run and then into the playoffs in poor form. Confidence has dropped a bit, momentum's dropped. I think in some ways we might be. Here's a positive for you, right? Mm-hmm. Positive way of thinking about it. I think the odds are probably pretty steep for us to get automatics now. I haven't looked at them, but you're probably talking 25 to 1 or something like
that. It's gone.
So are we better off accepting that now and going, okay, build up towards the playoffs, than missing out on automatics with 1 or 2 games left? Because you haven't necessarily got enough time to get really focused and accustomed to the challenge that lies ahead. And you often see those teams who just missed out on automatics flounder a bit in the playoffs. So I'm choosing to look at it as an opportunity for us to build up to that, and hopefully take the playoffs as we need to take them. But it's going to be interesting, as Briss often says, to see what happens, because you've got the workload to manage, you've got the fitness to manage, you've got form to manage, you've got players coming back from injury to manage. And there's a little part of me thinks this, especially with Watson's selection tonight, because he could have easily put Rigg in, kept Brown in, put Mayenda out on a wing. I think given Watson the start tonight, quite clearly shows that building the fitness up of players is at the forefront of his mind.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's going to be interesting. And look, I mean, we are feeling a bit frustrated because it's one of those nights. But it's one of those nights I think we've experienced a lot at the Stadium of Light with, those midweek games where, we huff and we puff and then we get a draw when we think we should have won. But we've seen these before. And the other positive is we're unbeaten in 3. So we can say that, we come out with another win, then, we're unbeaten in 4 and we keep on gathering momentum because we're not getting beat. So we'll see how it goes. Coventry at the weekend as well. And we know how much we love Coventry. And we'll obviously be covering that as well. But I hope everyone who's listening kind of feels a little bit more positive. Thank you very much, Martin, for trying to put that positive spin on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure we managed. And really, I'm still really frustrated. Some of those earlier games that you look at some of the games earlier in the season, like Bristol City, right, where we get an equaliser in the last minute, and there's still so much football that we played then. You kind of go, that could be a good point. Win your home games, draw your away games, you'll be there or thereabouts. If you draw a home game and win an away game, you're still on par for the points. At this stage of the season, we've got no margin for error. We had 0 margin for error going into tonight, and we've from the top 2 we've dropped further off again. So I'm not sure how positive you can be, but I'll take the equaliser, take the spirit that invoked. A great goal keeps the little unbeaten run going. And, hopefully we can get back to winning ways on Saturday at Coventry.
Oh, that's it. We've got 9 games to build momentum up to that. But we'll be back, Martin, of course, building up to Coventry. And thanks again, mate. And thanks again if you've listened this far on our
well done.
on our long dissection of a 1-1 draw against Preston North End.
You know what? But, I thought we'd struggle to get like 15 minutes out of that because until the last 10 minutes, nothing had really happened, has it? So I think we've done pretty well, mate.
We're probably going to talk for three-quarters of an hour about that 7 minutes with them going down injured, but there you go. But thanks again if you've stuck with us. Keep a look at our Roker Report for all the build-up ahead of the game against Coventry at the weekend. I'm sure we'll be back with a preview before then. So keep an eye out in all the usual places for the next How We're the podcast. That should drop very soon. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.